I'd like to just thank panelists for coming out today and start with Mike for short introductions for them to tell you a little bit about their backgrounds, and then we will get into some questions that have already been asked. I'll ask the panelists, and you'll have time for additional questions from the audience if you didn't have a chance to submit in advance. So Mike, if you can introduce yourself.
Thanks. Everyone hear me? So my name is Michael Emerson. I'm with Johnson & Johnson, and my job is primarily on the healthcare professional side. Been with, been in the healthcare industry about 15 years. Have worked in everything from large companies to small startups, and I'm happy to be here. My couple things that I think about are the acumen of digital is very different in at least my organization. I think a lot of others out there versus this room. So that's one thing I think about is how to raise that level of acumen. And I'm really here to learn a lot about that.
Actually, I'd like to add for the remaining panelists, you know, we're grateful that you came to share a lot of knowledge, but surely there's something that, you know, you meet people in the hall afterward, you'd love if they asked you about something or something you'd like to get out of it, and you'd like to just learn from everyone in the room that collected knowledge. Line?
Yeah, so my name is Line Berg Østergaard. I come from Denmark, so that's the reason for the weird name. I live currently in Switzerland, and there I work for Zimmer, and I head up our global digital marketing team. I'm passionate about digital and social, very much indeed. I think what I'm looking mostly forward for this conference is really that we as collective peers and industry work together collaboratively to really solve some of the issues we're all facing. So looking for some challenging questions and also good conversations.
Thank you. Kelly?
Hi, I'm Kelly Meyer, CEO of Q-Pharma. I'm from southwestern Denmark, otherwise known as Texas. Q-Pharma is an analytics and predictive modeling company. We focus our analytics on understanding how people interact in and around healthcare decisions, payers, providers, and patients. And our passion is finding ways to kind of turn data into wisdom, something you can evaluate and act on.
I'll just add quickly, again in the same vein, Kelly has had the opportunity to feed 49 other families by founding this company, so I personally appreciate that. Gail, Cook Medical.
I'm Gail McDaniel. I'm from Cook Medical, which is in Bloomington, Indiana. It's not very far from Denmark. In fact, I broke my arm there just last October. I started Cook's social media efforts. I do their LinkedIn pages, I handle their Twitter accounts, and various other social media events. I also am very involved with our advertising and promotion, regulatory and compliance programs, and doing the training for our various marketing staffs in that arena. And now I'm taking on a new digital role. I'm the first digital person that's embedded in one of the Cook's business units. So when I go back, I'm going to start doing whole new programs for specifically for a business unit. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you, Gail. People met Greg. Do you care to add anything?
Just for a little reference, I'm a group marketing manager in peripheral interventions at Boston Scientific, focused on our core business. So we tend to be pretty lean and mean and lately launch heavy, and that's been where we've had a lot of this focus in some of the iOS apps.
Thank you. Jitesh?
Hi, my name is Jitesh Radke. I'm actually responsible for product strategy and innovation at Cegedim Relationship Management. And I'm going to actually take on Matt's session from this morning and then remind everybody of two things which he said. One was that he wanted to say that technology should not be the goal, it should be an enabler. And I also wanted to point out the fact that somebody mentioned that he's now on the dark side, that he's in sales. So what Cegedim Relationship Management tries to do is we try to do two things. We try to be an enabler for the technology so that you can do your job better or whatever you need to do by way of, maybe do B2D, B2B, discussions around digital profiling, knowing what Facebook, Twitter, your doctors are doing, be it CRM for medical device. And therefore, we're trying to bridge the gap between the Jedi and the Empire so that, and basically, again, from my perspective, it's key for me to understand, from this conference, that what can I do to make your job easier, right? So I'm trying to learn what you guys do and what we can do better to make it easier for you guys to do what you do.
Thank you. So the first question is one that probably most of us have had to field one time or another, and it's one that I've already heard a half dozen times. Tell me about ROI. We bought into social media. We get it. You should talk in the conversation, I believe. But my CFO wants to know, what am I going to get back for it? Lena, would you start?
Yeah, I would love to. So I think we've already had quite a number of good examples today of people who managed to grab their arms around ROI. I'd like to kind of start out with saying, I think we need to stop saying, it's not possible, and think how it's possible. And I have 3 ideas of how we could kind of approach it. Of course, there's what I call the old school stats. So, visits or increase of visits over time or usage over time. We can look at that, maybe even compare it with some other data, from how the business is doing and start doing some livelihoods of how we, with what we do, impact. Then I like to look at what I call value. So here it would be looking into the sentiment, so really tapping into social media. What is the sentiment that's being said around what we're doing? Also, looking into that whole, how valuable do you think that is? So it's more a softer measure, and then the time spent using our digital tools, assets, what we do, and then finally, which I think we don't in Zimmer do enough of, but that's something we're going to focus on more, especially after some tips from today, is the whole leads and inbound marketing. I think especially the guys from Medtronic are doing that really well, and I'm happy we just had a guy join us from Medtronic that do that really well. So hopefully in the future we'll be doing that better.
Gail, I know you wanted to add something.
And could we look at ROO, the ROO rather than the ROI? When I say ROO, it's the return on objective. Before we start a digital program or any kind of program that involves the web or whatever, we like to sit down and actually come up with the objectives that we want to measure. What do we want out of the program? And so then we have something that is tangible. It's really hard in the medical device world, and especially when you're dealing with purchasing organizations and you're dealing with purchasing units, and to figure out what you do actually affect the sale. So it's much easier to say, okay, well, if we wanted to reach 5,000 people in XYZ community, or the area or medical specialty, did we meet that goal? So we kind of taken that same ROI and looked at it in a different way. And we're also just getting ready to start a new program that's focused much more on lifetime customer value, which is the same kind of program that works in lots of industries as far as direct marketing goes, but it's actually looking at which one of our customers are actually bringing the most to the table, so that we may be able to balance the effectiveness. We may be able to allocate more resources to that particular segment. That I'll report back later, next year on that, see how that worked out for us, because it's kind of a difficult assignment, but I think we're going to be able to work it out.
I have a few thoughts on this myself, but instead of adding them, I'll instigate and ask the room. For those of you who've had this conversation with some financial type who wants to know the answer to what's the ROI, have you heard anything you could actually tell your CFO? You did? Okay, ROO, yes? How many of you are somewhat unsatisfied and don't feel ready to answer the ROI question? Okay, a few hands. So, any of you on the panel? Press a nod. Yeah, okay, that was nice. Sorry, being an instigator. But really, I want to know, what's my payback on this thing? Where'd you go?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. I think we're all struggling with that. But what I've seen, kind of the higher management structure that you go, you can get a lot further down the path by having, again, their acumen at a higher level. So there's a lot of things. You can throw a lot of squishy programs back to them and say, you know, what's the ROI on that equity TV ad we did 5 years ago? They're not going to have an answer. So I think a lot of it is the reticence to really understand, like, what, you know, if someone wants to set up a brand Facebook page, the first thing they're going to say is, why would we do that? I mean, my kids use that. Well, how is that going to help me grow my sales? So I think a lot of it is just getting their understanding up to a higher level of what some of these tactics are. And then you can actually start having the conversation. If you go in with a pure ROI mathematical equation, you're going to rip it apart. That's just been my experience.
I would tend to definitely agree with that. That's why I know what I was saying was a bit, you know, fluffy and not concrete. But at the end of the day, we can't look at what we're trying to do with the traditional. We spend this amount of dollars and then we gain this amount of revenue to the business. We have to start coming up with metrics that measure in different ways, especially when it comes to the social media part. And we can't just say, well, we had this many people talk about us, so therefore we gained $1 million US to the company.
You know what?
She's right.
I'm just gonna, you know, maybe ask a question that's slightly different way. I'm sorry, I'm playing this role as well a little bit.
Enjoy.
So I'm just trying to figure out, so is the ROI the only question, or can we ask it the other way around? So can we go talk to our management and tell them, what's the cost of not being on Facebook or not being on Twitter and not have the brand awareness that some of our competition is definitely trying to have, and does that help move that case along a little bit as well? Anybody has some thoughts?
I almost look at it a little bit the way that we look at an NPV, which you'll never have this perfect information looking forward. Just like that, it's actually very difficult in a lot of cases, especially if you're talking a strategy that has multiple touch points. Which of these things actually move the needle? So just like it's hard to look forward with perfect information, it's actually quite difficult oftentimes to look backwards with perfect information. So acknowledging that, unless you have a strategy that, you fire off a message and somebody immediately acts on it, which doesn't apply to most of the folks in this room, I think having a comprehensive way of looking at your investment ROI should be one of those tools, but you should be thinking about other pillars. I think return on objectives is perhaps one way to look at it, but specifying in advance how are we going to measure the success of our program, what are going to be those touch points, and having more of a nuanced view and getting that agreement up front that that's the correct way to look at things, because I don't know that you'll ever get the numbers to be as clean as you want.
I'm just going to add on another thought to this too. And back in the old days, which I came from, people used to run print ads all the time. And how many people ever ask you how you defend the ROI on a print ad that you ran? Probably not very often. And the thing is that when we go to the digital space for the very first time, we really have analytics and we have tools that can measure what we're actually doing. And just starting off from that point of measuring, even if it's elementary, is just saying, all right, this is how many people click through on something. That's data that we never had before. We haven't had. And so to go to the extent of, having to prove if it pushed the needle or not, we just start off at the very beginning. We're 2 steps ahead than where we were 20 years ago.
I'll throw a question back to the room. I'm curious if anyone's doing anything like an A/B test where you say, hypothetically, east of the Mississippi wants to get the tactic, west of the Mississippi they get nothing, and look at the results. Is anyone trying to do something like that to compare?
I don't know how you do that online. No, you can geo-target.
Yeah, we do some geo-targeting.
Who's speaking? Oh, there you are.
Okay. We do some geo-targeting like that, and we're basically just looking at the interactions, and then therefore do those interactions open up new doors and new relationships to us as a company. And for us, that is the ROI on the social media, and then whether or not the sales rep can actually pick up that relationship and cultivate it to turn it into a sale would be the second order consequence of that relationship.
Has that helped you to target your future investments?
Yes.
I think that's much easier to do when you're working with a consumer audience too than it is with physicians, I would think.
I would agree, but I think we also can become much better at tying in, and this kind of back to this morning's presentation about, sales and marketing is tying in those things much closer. In us, for example, taking, what people do on the website and go into the CRM system, measure how they build that into their sales plan, they put an estimate on it. And again, I know it's not because of that action on the website, they're, sales, but at least start to much more justify that it's connected. At the end of the day, we would want to try and get to a point where we can say we made money without digital assets.
Well, I have two roles. I get to ring the chimes, and I have to keep us moving. So I'm sure we have a lot more to add. I know I have a few thoughts on this.
We've got one more question over here, actually.
Oh, okay.
It was just more of an answer or comment that going back to your idea that these are all tools, so rather than does Facebook make us money, it's more using it in a spectrum of ways from the very specific, like sometimes we'll do a Facebook-only campaign and see how many leads we get from it. Or sometimes we'll ask questions, where did you hear about it, or are you even on it? So that's in the middle of information. And then the very far weekend is, I suppose it's just like spending money to pay a person to talk about your product. You don't have a direct correlation. I paid him $10,000 to talk, how many sales did I get? So it's using the tool from very specific lead information all the way to very soft information.
Thank you, Ms. Yeah, I add that, myself personally, I kind of don't like the term social media. It sounds very kind of that thing. I ask, what's the value of being found? And social is just a way to amplify your message. So I'll leave that and go to our second question, which is, how can digital marketing help improve product outcomes? How can it decrease adverse events, such as surgical complications? And how can it increase patient outcomes? And I'd like to start with Jitesh.
So I have two thoughts around that, So we're talking about, again, technology being an enabler. So, obviously we've always had things like surgical techniques. We've always had the ability for, doctors to figure out what they need to do. But as far as patients go, some of that information has not been transferred to the patient. And I was actually, doing some research, and I found out that a lot of companies have found out that the patients are in that passive state we discussed this morning because they're afraid of that what their quality of life would be if they actually went through something. And I think the digital devices and material can actually help patients navigate that. So if you can enable your doctors with some sort of a digital aid so that they can show them what their potential patient outcomes would be when they're having the interaction with the patient, some sort of a material like that, I think that would help. The other thing is, obviously, I talk about surgical techniques. So one is the patient side, so the consumer side, and the other one is actually the physician side themselves. So it's so much easier for a physician, in my opinion, to be able to look at a digital aid, which is the same thing. I mean, we used to have printed materials, but now we're trying to do this digitally, and quickly look at how an incision needs to be made, or how a particular screw can be tightened or loosened with which particular gauge of screw. So I think it just makes it more interactive, makes it a little bit more fun and interesting for them to be able to learn that rather than going that same thing through a flip book, right? So I think that's just my 2 cents on how I think we can look at both sides, both from the patient side as well as the doctor side, and kind of bring them together towards a common goal.
Please.
So I think, when you look at what we do in 3 steps, it's identifying right patients for the right therapy, it's getting them onboarded, and it's keeping them supported. I think the best way to improve the outcomes over here and lower the adverse effect is in the front end, making sure that the selection piece is ideal. And there's, as Chris was talking in the last conversation, there's more data than ever before about patients, whether it be their medical data from a claims perspective, EMR data, consumer demographic data. All of those things are available in at least a patient de-identified way that you can link it back to the physician to kind of identify that ideal patient, if you will. And by identifying that ideal patient, you're going to get your market, but you're also going to maximize the opportunity for the best possible outcomes with the least side effects.
How many of you were at Nathan's workshop yesterday, Mobile Apps? Okay, yeah, I mean, I thought that the app that he showed, the larynx, and how patients can be right there, the doctor can be right there bedside and show them a video or show them something about what we're doing today and the care, that is extremely meaningful. So if there's nothing to add, I'll go on to our next question. Please.
I would just say I think it was really interesting. At Cook, we had a really interesting marketing issue that we needed to solve. I don't know if you're familiar, but we have a very extensive line of IVF products, in vitro fertilization, and it's actually in some parts of this world we're known more for IVF than we are for any of our other devices. But we were running into the issues of the fact that they were growing, that the use of our products was growing dramatically, especially in third world countries. And how do we get our reps there to train people on a very simple process? It's not a simple process, it's called ICSI, where one sperm cell is used to fertilize one single egg. And so we actually used the web and created a whole video day by day that took the viewer through step 1 from negative day 1 from collecting the eggs, and took them all the way through the process, day by day, by process, so that we had this available to doctors and any kind of technician that was using IVF anywhere in the world, because it was available to them 24/7. You have a rep, you deal with your reps. They have vacation schedules. They have times that they're not available, and you're not available in 24 times, in all the time zones. And so we were able to take that video and put it on the web and make that available to them in any situation. The interesting side effect of that was that many patients who had gone through in vitro fertilization had never seen the process. They had no clue what the doctors did to them, what they went through from the time that they collected the eggs to the times they were reimplanted back into the mother. And just the comments that Cook got back from that from patients, which were totally a secondary audience, was amazing. It is incredible. So if you ever want to look at it, the website is cookartlab.com, and the video's there. And actually, if you've been through the process and don't know how it works, help yourself.
For sharing that.
Joe, I'd add one. I think that patient compliance, when that's part of the therapy, could be an area where there's real opportunity. Like, for example, at coronary drug-eluting stents, one of our challenges was that about a third of patients never get their initial dose of clopidogrel, let alone the enduring therapy they need. And that's a critical component in ensuring you get good outcomes. And that was definitely a barrier when concerns started to arise around stent thrombosis to continue to use drug-coated stents versus bare metal stents. And so an app that would help change that, end patient behavior to help them understand the benefit of complying with the medical therapy and help them actually, stay compliant would certainly have a huge impact on outcomes.
I like the idea of showing them a video of what happens when you stop taking your medication at 30, 60, 90.
And that's why, when I said in the beginning that we need to look at, both sides of what we can actually show the patients, that we can enable the practitioners to be able to show the patients that what's the benefit. in real life video, for example, of how your quality of life could improve, rather than just theoretical. I think that makes a huge impact on what the patients can then do with that information.
I love that. Is that an incremental idea for anyone in terms of patient follow-through, maybe showing videos bedside? So if you end up doing that, would you let me know? I think that'd be cool, and I'd love to feature it in my group, because I think that's exactly the kind of idea and technology that something like the medical devices group can broadcast and really benefit the entire community. Is there a question back there?
More of a comment, Anthony Potter from Hanger Clinic. I think one of the things that's well proven for years and years now is that pre-operative education and information improves post-operative outcomes. And digital marketing is one of those tools that you can start to use pre-operatively to improve those outcomes post-operatively. That's one thing. And just one comment on your last comment. We at Hanger Clinic, one of the things we focus on is providing information to patients. We deal with prosthetics and orthotics, so it's really post-amputation patients in particular, of providing as much information, often after because we can't do it before, but it's delivered through a peer-to-peer relationship where people who've had amputations go in and talk to those patients. So what we set up is that initiation of the relationship through a peer-to-peer relationship, and digital tools are really useful in that space as well.
I could very much see testimonials of patients and what it was like and what they went through to be extremely meaningful, especially for someone who's scared about the operation ahead. Thank you for adding that. Our next question is really at the core of this conference. How can digital marketing help your sales organization deliver your key message? And I'd like to start with Kelly.
So I'm going to modify the question a little bit based on Greg's conversation this morning. How does it modify your story, or how does it advance your story versus the message? You know, if you look at digital marketing tools, they didn't all show up at once and fully formed, right? They came along one at a time, and they kind of evolved through time. And so, and chances are we all tried something, and then we try something else, and then we try a new technique. And when you operate in a serial mode like that, you tend to think of these tools serially, and you tend to think of them as independent events. Well, if you look at other types of marketing vehicles out there, there was some of that, but there was also kind of an ecosystem that's been developed. So, who remembers WordPerfect?
I would say WordPerfect.
Was WordPerfect better than Word?
I thought it was.
As a tool itself, standalone, virtually everybody said WordPerfect was better than Word. Well, then why did Word win? Okay, Word won because it had then the world's first ecosystem, and the first ecosystem was Microsoft Office. Okay, the second you tried to paste a table from Excel into WordPerfect, you gave it up and went to Word. Okay? Not because the technology was so much better overall, because that one simple thing you wanted to do. So when you start thinking about digital marketing, think of it as an ecosystem, okay, of multiple tools by which you can have multiple ways to advance the story across those mechanisms. The other thing to think about is from an audience perspective. Yes, you can act on individual physicians, but there's also technology out there that allows you to look at groups of physicians, of working physicians, of how they work together. So have an integrated approach, okay, across your digital marketing, across integrated networks of physicians, gives you a much greater opportunity to be effective.
Thank you. Would anyone like to add?
Well, I was going to say, in the topic of just, enhancing the sales force with some of these tools. Obviously, we need to think about the big picture. If we look just specifically at that tactic and what it can do for us, I think there's several things that I've seen value of, with mobile content management. One is that, you look down the road, right, and all of us, I think, are facing increasing margin pressures, and the sales channel is difficult to invest in, right? So how do we deal with that? Some companies may hire less reps and have reps cover bigger territories, or they may hire folks at a lower skill level. They may ask them to sell more products. Whatever you do, though, you're going to be asking to get more out of your investment. And so, if you look at these tools, kind of like the old Steve Jobs quotes of like a computer being a bicycle for the mind, I see these apps as being something along those lines where you can take a rep, whether they're new or tenured, there's going to be something about the products they're probably not going to be able to know. And so as a memory aid, as a tool to bring someone back on message, as a way to help them access the right information quickly and present it when you have the opportunity, I think these are fantastic tools.
Fair enough.
Just want to ask you maybe a question, because I think it's great we put out these tools. It's great we have the ecosystem. That's, it's a beautiful thought, a beautiful mind, a beautiful execution. But one of the things I feel we're forced with, or challenged with a lot, is we can have the greatest tools, but is the sales reps really using them?
Well, that's a critical question. That comes back to that question of,
do you have metrics? So one of the things we've started to use more is just Adobe DPS. So separate from having a full-blown content management system, which is clearly where everyone would want to be, just as a standalone app, Adobe DPS has been a great tool for being able to build out a kind of a micro content management system at a very effective cost that has built-in metrics, right? Starting to just, tiptoe into the water, but starting to measure your return on investment and make sure you're getting that utilization of the tool, right? You want to make sure you're talking to your reps, observing your reps, but then also getting that unbiased data, right? Because they're going to tell you that they love your product, they like you, got a relationship, or et cetera, right? So what are they actually doing with these tools? Our experience with the content management has been that it just absolutely blows away any tool we've ever provided them. Several comments along the lines of, hey, I've been in this division for 10 or 20 years, this is the best launch we've ever had. Things that are hard to ignore, some of the feedback, and the results have been really good as well in terms of just blowing away our original forecast numbers. We've seen growth in the commodity category in the order of 40%. So we're seeing those kinds of returns. But I think it is a multi-pronged strategy of making sure you are observing that return and learning from it as well.
If I may, I'd like to ask the audience, do any of you have an example to share with us about a time that you were concerned about salesperson adoption and you overcame that and you have a success story to share?
Joe Gaspar, software. Is this on?
It's on.
Before I address your question, I would like to just offer an observation. I think that Kelly was onto something, and he didn't say it as succinctly as I think he could have, and that is one of the best ways for marketers and salespeople to work together is for the marketing department to view the sales force as just another channel of a multi-channel marketing strategy. And Matt alluded to it earlier. Now he has a split personality of being responsible for both marketing and sales. The dark side is that the sales force will be the largest and most expensive element of the multi-channel strategy, just by definition. You have thousands of people out there at hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And so when you get into this whole ROI discussion, you can co-opt the sales budget into the marketing budget and start to have some statistical analysis. And Aberdeen Research did a research study recently about the effect of mobility on the sales force, and it's a very simple metric. Companies that support mobility and digital tools in the hands of the sales force are 75% more likely to hit sales quotas than those who do not. It's a very strict. Pardon me?
I think that bears repeating. Would you repeat that?
So companies that support mobility in their sales force are 75% more likely to hit their sales quotas than those who do not. That's Aberdeen Research.
And basically, I would just like to add, as far as adoption is concerned, I think trying to show to the sales force that there is actually an advantage in using these tools, and this can be proven, right? Because you actually can see if you can monitor which reps are actually using these tools, because you know that they've actually done some presentations, so they've used the digital tool, and you can actually obviously look at the sales data at the end, right? So you already know. It's a very easy ROI to calculate, to say, listen, these are the type of reps who actually use the digital aids, and because of that, the adoption adoption rate at a physician level or the sales increased by this much. Now that's a message which is very clear to salespeople, right? So you did something, it increased something by this much. So you put those metrics out there and your adoption rate would skyrocket.
I used to be a sales guy. There's 3 or 4 simple rules. There's 3 or 4 simple rules. First, make it easy for me to use what we're going to do. Okay? Number 2, appeal to my rice bowl. Show me how this is going to impact going forward. Number 3, don't tell me something that I should know. Okay? Unless it's in an insightful way that you know this and this builds on what you already know. Okay? And always forget the 4th one.
The 4th one is remember the other 3.
I had a quick question. Everyone keeps talking about reps and will they use it? And I just wonder how many of you involved reps throughout creation? I mean, I'm talking a top tier rep, a low tier, medium tier. See, are you creating something they'll use or creating something you think they'll use?
So with the apps that I showed, we absolutely had a team of reps and regional managers. We would walk through the exact scenarios they would use them, how they would use them, and lots of great feedback. For example, in the earlier phases, we actually looked at doing a little bit less marketing to make it more kind of company-to-company comparisons, because that would have been more efficient and easier for us. And the comment there was, well, if I'm going up against this company, and I show 2 products they don't currently use, I'm going to get sidetracked in this conversation. And it's not very easy. So there are a number of different feedback loops to the development of these apps. And quite frankly, probably the best ideas we've had came directly from sales. You always have to think about the intent of what they're trying to do rather than the specific solution they might offer. I think that's key in making sure you hear the feedback correctly and use it correctly, but tremendous value.
I think you have to, and also they have to be part of the rollout process as well, because that's the authentic source that's going to come and prove this out.
Yeah, those are, this is Jennifer Soul from IDEX Laboratories. Those are all excellent points, but we found that we actually underestimated the learning curve of the sales reps with the technology. I think, Greg, this morning you had mentioned that your sales force was able to kind of pick up and run with it, but we've actually found that our journey has been much longer than that, and we've actually had to put in a series of learning tools and steps to help them overcome the technology to embrace the content. And that started with just simple tutorials, and then what we actually did was we took the high-performing sales reps who had been using the technology for a specific period of time and videoed them giving a demonstration on how they were able to integrate this technology into their sales processes to improve their own individual performance, so that we were able to provide a peer-to-peer learning environment to encourage people to adopt the technology. And those are some tactics that we actually found really ramped up the learning curve significantly to get us where we needed to be.
Good. Thank you for sharing that.
Actually, I just wanted to mention, that's a great point which you brought up. But one of the things which I have seen personally that also helps is reps like to use things which they use in daily lives, right? So if a technology or a tool is already familiar, so I'm talking about devices like iPads, which is pretty much prevalent out there, or iPhone, iOS devices. So if you're actually trying to use these devices which are more intuitive and they're already using it in daily life, if you just extend that a little bit, I think the adoption can be a little bit better.
I can't remember if I made this comment to the group or if this was a one-off discussion after, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself. We haven't had to do a lot of training for the technology interface. We really try to design it to be as intuitive as possible. You always have a few folks who maybe don't get that and lag a little bit, but the vast majority were just fine, and we helped the folks who need some extra help over time. But where we focus a little bit more on training is more in using the information, because we've now provided them with more information than they've ever had. And so how do you think about really being more clinical and extracting this value? It's one thing to provide people with the answers, it's another to take it to that next level and really help them think about the so what and selling it at a different level, because you really are giving them new capabilities.
Hi, this is Dharmesh Thakkar from Johnson & Johnson. Just to add to that, I think the great conversation. We recently deployed for one of our franchises a few apps on iPad, e-detailing, sales ordering, things like that. I think it's working, with the field, really understanding the challenges in the field, to your point before around, what adds value to them, right? And also helps the overall goals, basically. And I think if you understand the field level challenges and design it outside in that from end user perspective, like in this example, we had 90% adoption in the first 4 weeks because of the efficiencies it adds to them. Saving over 50% of the time for a sales rep on a daily basis for some sales, replenishments and orderings and things like that. So I think that's a very important point. And that happened because marketing, sales, IT all ended up on a field trip, really understanding day-to-day challenges and then involving them in the build process too, following Agile, that's the methodology we follow, and really engaging them through and having those channels open for them to give feedback. So we deployed it to some pilot users in the country and get feedback on a continuous basis in terms of what's working and what's not.
Thank you. We'll have this be the last comment on this thread.
Yeah, hi, I'm Brian McEntee from Edwards again. So we've been talking about the carrot. We've been talking about the return, getting reps engaged and all this sort of thing. Has anyone encountered the Big Brother syndrome? We're going to measure you and we're going to see who's performing well and we'll also see who's not doing so well. And the fear that kind of spreads from that.
We've had that experience. We started a process that it was just a quick thing, it was like a Yammer project. It wasn't Yammer, but it's the same kind of concept, that they would just tweet what happened, what they did if they were at a hospital or whatever, and they wouldn't do it because they knew that the people that were watching or paying attention to it were the people in the C-suites, and so they just never did anything. But it was for that very reason. And he said, we don't want you all watching over our shoulders. Yeah, you have to be very careful. And I just asked Greg another thing too that I was wondering if you all have experienced is, now with all the off-the-shelf applications and the fact that they're so easy to build, we also run the risk of us not providing the apps that the reps will create them on their own, and then they're out of our control. And that in itself is a regulatory nightmare right there. And so you all might want to be aware of that.
Before I change subjects, I'm curious, how many of you in this room have ever been in a company that adopted Salesforce.com? I'm curious to know how many of those of you had Salesforce not get adopted by sales. Okay. Interesting. Thank you. Great discussion. I wanted to talk about customer service a bit. What role does digital marketing play in delivering quality customer service? And I'd like to start with Michael.
Okay, so quality customer service. So I kind of look at all of this through the lens of relationship marketing. If all what we're doing is developing relationships, other than the marketers out there that have, let's say, an orphan drug where your complete audience is like 100 people worldwide, you can just talk to them one by one. Very few of those, I think, out there. In most cases, to be scalable, be relevant, you really have to think through the lens of relationship marketing. And so the way digital can help accentuate that, I always call it, it's really a force multiplier to everything else you're doing out there, is really understanding those preferences, and then as you're building that relationship, to be relevant to them. It's very similar to what Chris was saying earlier, and to provide customer service. Again, I don't like that term. It's really the customer experience that I want to engage that person with. It really is about stepping back, understanding the relationship I want to have with these audiences, what preferences they might have, and then how do I begin to have that relationship with them. That to me is true customer service and customer experience that we need to aim towards getting. I'm thinking through, and by the way, this goes for either HCP or consumer. on our, my personal experiences are, we have some patients in the diabetes space that only interact with us through our Facebook page or our Twitter page, and that's just the way they interact. Some people will only call our 800 number, no matter what you do. And some people will only talk to the doctor. And so the number of apertures to open up just expands like exponentially once you have and leverage some of these digital channels, but they have to be tied together and they have to be understanding what the preferences are, not to market to sell them stuff, but to understand their body behavior, to really respond to that and build that relationship. So to me, digital marketing is a platform that can multiply all the things you've been doing in the past if you do it thoughtfully and not look at them as just a tool, just to use, just for the fun of it that they're brought together. And I think I've seen companies like get closer to that, but to me, in my mind, that's kind of the way I look at kind of the long tail of this is how do I actually achieve that. And there's a lot of good CPG companies out there that kind of are starting to do that you can use as a model.
I really appreciate that sentiment. Oftentimes in a forum like this, we're talking about acquisition, and I think digital is a perfect, ideal place for loyalty. Here's an idea that I just throw out there. What would it be like if your customer got an email, a genuine, not automated, not went out in force with just the mail merge, from somebody in customer care and said, Sheila, thank you for being our customer. I know you have the Quinton 9500. I'm just letting you know that I am your customer care person. Wanted to introduce myself. P.S. if you need paper, I have a sale that, and really make it so it's like, wow, okay, I got an email that was just, he's a guy I can contact. I think that engenders real familiarity, and when it comes time for there to be an upsell or something, please, up front.
Imagine the impact of that. Imagine the impact of that if you could use some of the things that Kelly's talking about in terms of big data analytics and having marketing place those messages in the hands of your sales force as the next prescriptive step that the sales force could take. Hugely beneficial. And it moves the needle in a huge way from a revenue perspective.
I think one of the big opportunities is really in providing a shortcut to the answers that people are looking for. There's a great opportunity for many things in digital. We've talked about helping the reps get better information. We've talked about searching on websites. I think social media is another one of those examples. Robin from Kimberly-Clark was in the panel last year and talked about their Feeding Tube business, and they've got a Facebook fan page for My Mikey. And if you look at it, it's fantastic. There's almost 2,000 users on there now, and there's a series of different questions people come up with, where I've got this issue, how do I deal with it? Someone else chimes in with a practical answer. And so it's a phenomenal tool where they are obviously investing in that channel, but what's coming out of it is much more than what they're putting into it because of all the user input. And so that's I think a great example of a very positive way to use social media.
But I think it's not only just that, because people are coming to you and you're having that interaction, but it's also, I think we as an industry can become much better at reaching out. Using technology and, the whole monitoring and listening to our advantage, it sounds wrong saying to our advantage, but I really feel we sit with so much information that we can provide to people, help them educate, help them overcome, to the point that was mentioned before about, the preoperative information. Give them that information they're looking for if they can't find it, because there's so much stuff out in the space.
Yeah, one trick I just now thought about this is one trick I kind of use with my team is just have them, and this may be more kind of in the VP planning for the next year thinking kind of broadly is think about a world where, I think to your point, the sales force being the biggest line item in the budget, you didn't have a sales force, or you didn't have the customer service rep. What would you do? So you still have this job to do. How would you do it? And that tends to open up your mind quite a bit. So if they don't have the privilege to come to a conference like this and really understand kind of what digital tools are available, you still get to the crux of the matter, which is how do I want to engage? What do I want to do? And that kind of starts the conversation going. Because really what we're trying to do, and the tools and the technology exists for the most part. It's just how to better surround the job that we're having to do and not rely on, we have this giant customer service department with a bunch of customer service reps or a bunch of sales reps out there, but think, beyond that.
Thank you. When we met last night to talk over some of the questions, one of the ones that we came up with was about the role of the physician. And if you'll indulge me for a moment, every Tuesday I have the privilege of sending out an email to this great big group. And I had nothing to say last night. I just did not know what to write. I wrote something very, very lame and went to sleep. And then I realized this physician conversation that we had, this would be a great chance for me to integrate the two. So if you'll indulge my reading, I wrote as the subject line, "Why are you still trying to influence physician preferences?" And I wrote, Bosnia and Herzegovina-based member Zelko Ronkovic asked this week, does the med device industry need physicians, or are we just customers? It's a topic we'll discuss today at the Digital Marketing for Medical Devices Conference in Minneapolis. Zelko, we unequivocally need the voice of physicians here in the medical devices group. As a medical device marketer, I'm often asked, how do manufacturers win awareness and interest from physicians? I'd like to ask a slightly different question of this predominantly manufacturer-based group, though. How important is it, really, to educate physicians about the benefits of your product? I understand the physician's role in market research, design, and development. I see the relevance when selling into primary care, of course, where the physician owner makes the purchasing decision, and where specialist referrals are involved. That came from you, Scott Nelson. But with more hospital-owned practices, where physicians are employees, and in acute care, where buying groups, including GPOs, are calling the shots, physician preference seems to carry less weight. So, unless you have a medical breakthrough and dramatically improved patient outcomes, why are you still spending resources on physicians in the acute arena? And we already got 5 responses on that, which I will withhold, and instead ask the panel if anything I've asked has resonated with you, if you'd like to jump in with your thoughts.
Yeah, it's really resonated with me. Especially in the area of products that we manufacture, that I'm responsible for, which are abdominal thoracic grafts, endografts. That physician has to know how to put that graft in there correctly, and we as manufacturers have to show them. And that physician preference is everything. Our whole company has been built on physician preference. Even in the very earliest days, Mr. Cook used to go to a convention, and he had a Bunsen burner set up on his table, and he would make catheters to match the doctor's specifications, and they'd say bend it a little to the left, bend it a little to the right. I can't imagine. We have hundreds of products that are named after physicians who created those products with Cook. They are an integral part of our business model. Yes, HPS, or the business solutions purchasing organizations, yes, they are important, but at the end of the day, they're not the ones that are putting that device in the patient. The physician is the one that's putting it in the patient. And if it's not meeting the physician the way the physician's been trained properly, if it's not meeting the way they want to do that procedure, then we haven't done our job properly.
So I heard you say physician education is paramountly important.
Yes.
I didn't hear you say the physician is going to impact whether or not a Cook device gets implanted or not.
Well, it depends. First of all, it depends on the device. But I will tell you that I do know for a fact that when you go up before an organization, a purchasing organization within the hospital, and they make decisions, there is a group of physicians that are having an impact on that decision, and they're going to make recommendations, the ones that they think are the right ones to use, and especially if it has to do with devices that are that would be considered class 3 devices, or ones that are very technical. Like, for example, a stent is used for a patient who has compression of the ureters, and those ureters are closing down, and that device that we make is the one it's the only one in the market that's going to be able to solve that problem. That physician's getting the preference right there.
Something to add?
I would like to add that, I think it depends on the physician as well, right? So if I'm just out of a teaching hospital, right, and I have much less influence, if you will, right, so I'll probably toe my company line and use the, whatever the buying committee is recommending. But if you do a segmentation and targeting correctly and trying to lean on topics which were brought up earlier, and maybe find out through digital channels who are the key influencers, who are the right physicians who actually have the ability to influence buying committees or even override buying committees, because that happens. You can actually say, I think as a physician that this particular device is better than other devices, and here's my reasons why. And in this hospital and my attending privileges, I would use this device. So, I mean, if you can actually make some of these doctors your brand ambassadors, if you will, obviously based on clinical outcomes, then that's a very, very powerful tool, and I don't think we should try and give up on that tool as of today.
I think it's really hard to think about this as one decision. When you think about healthcare being millions of decisions, there's three main players in those decisions. You have the patient, you have the provider, and you have the payer. And each medical decision can be mapped somewhere in that triangle as who's the predominant player. If it's Latisse, the patient's going to ask the doctor's going to probably prescribe it, and the payer's going to say, knock yourself out, right? If it's a complex, life-saving procedure, the physician is going to drive the boat, the payer is probably going to try to stay out of the way, and the patient's going to find a way to pay the copay. All right? If it's a first-stage antihypertensive therapy, the payer is going to say, doc, you have these three choices. And the doctor's not going to complain too much. But every healthcare decision can be plotted somewhere in that triangle, okay? And each of those three players have a relative role. And with the data that's out there available now, you can start to make intuitive guesses as to what each player's role is in that particular decision.
There's no doubt that the economic customer...
If you have a comment you'd like to add, please go ahead.
There's no doubt that the economic customer is becoming more important. I don't know that that necessarily means that the clinical customer is becoming less important. You can imagine if you're sitting around the table and they're deciding which technology to bring in and which price, and the doctor says, yeah, they're all kind of the same, that's going to be a pretty short conversation, right? So you clearly still need to build that physician preference and make sure that the person who's best equipped to evaluate the value of that product thinks that it's highly valuable. But at the same time, as we look at the rise in this economic customer, we need to have good solutions to address their concerns. How is this product going to fit within my economic constraints? How is this going to provide economic value? Why is this a good return on the investment we're putting into this? And so I think that's something that we need to look at multiple different ways we can approach that customer, understand them, and provide them a relevant answer. And I do think there's a role for digital technology in that solution. You can, for example, do something like create an online forum where you can discuss some of these events, right, and provide value to those customers and start to understand who they are and understand their needs. I think there's many ways you can approach it, but clearly we need to understand this customer better.
Well, we've got about 2 minutes left. I want to thank our panel. I thought that was great, really. I will close by a little pitch, if you don't mind. And that is that friends don't let friends write bad emails. You are my friends. Don't let me write crap for an email that goes out to 110,000 people because I just ain't smart enough to come up with 52 good ideas a year. I need you. So please seriously consider how you can contribute to the group. Just for laughs, I put a profile link to the doctor who raised the original question. And so far, his profile had 438 clicks today. So it's a great way to get some extra exposure, have something ready on your profile, a link to your website. It's a great way to use social media to share and amplify your message. We thank you very much. We are breaking now for lunch. When you return, this side is for social stuff, and that side is for mobile stuff. Thank you very much. We'll see you at lunch.